Welcome to Forum 360, a global outlook with a local view. We are a nonprofit grant and donation funded program that depends on volunteer moderators who present a wide variety of topics. You can follow us on radio WONE FM 97.5 and WAKR AM 1590. We can be viewed on Hudson Community TV, Hudson, Ohio, and on Western Reserve Public Media Fusion Channel 993 on Spectrum. And you can find us on YouTube. If you want to know more about us, go to forum360.org. I'm your host, Pat Simons. It is fortunate if your area has a community media center that provides access to local public, educational, and governmental programming. The Alliance for Community Media is a national organization that protects and advocates for the interests and the operations of these centers, and it sticks up for those who use the facilities. Their vision is to promote civic engagement and education in support of diverse community voices. The guiding principles focus on free speech and community collaboration facilitated through training and use of equipment. Now, we're really fortunate to have Barbara Cagley from Avon Lake Community TV and Barbara VanBlarcum, Program Manager for Hudson Community TV. Glad to have you on the program with us today. Both of their organizations are representative of community media centers. Again, I thank you for coming on the show, and we're hoping that we get a lot of information and insight on these centers. I have purposefully asked the two of you because your organizations have many similarities, and I thought that would help us be clear about what goes on at your stations. Both of your services are departments of the city, and you're both city employees. I thought, first of all, our audience might like to have a clarification of the difference between community media centers that do programming that is public, educational, and governmental versus PBS. Either one of you can answer that question.
I'll take it.
All right.
Well, PBS, I remember it when it used to be called the Educational Channel. And I think the biggest difference is that it is not on cable necessarily. I mean, cable, it runs on cable, but it is a broadcast. When we used to have only 3 channels, it was the 4th channel. And they get, their funding is completely different. They get funding through the government, through members. And their programming is, they have local programming as well as they buy shows like Nova.
So there's significant differences. So people should not assume that PBS and community media programming is the same. Barbara Cagley, I thought perhaps we could talk about Avon Lake a bit and tell us what compels Avon Lake to provide this service.
Well, originally there were some really active people over 30 years ago that wanted to get the word out. Now it's changed in that there's not many ways that a city at a very local level that we can communicate with her. We have a local newspaper that at one time was just Avon Lake. It started picking up neighboring cities in Lorain County, and now recently it's just picked up some more cities in Cuyahoga County. So we're really diluted. And the only way to get Avon Lake specific content out there is through my department anymore.
So there's very much an interest to do that.
Yes.
How many stations do you operate, and what kind of programming is on each?
So we have public, government, and education running through our studio. However, the education programming is done through the high school. So we just literally have the cable that carries it out to the world. Government and public we manage through my department.
Oh, okay. And where do your programs come from? You mentioned education comes through the school district.
Right.
And the other programs?
That's content that we're producing, except for the City Club. Everything that we air is things that we have produced.
So you're getting like your city council meetings and things like that on as well?
Yeah.
What range of services do you provide the public?
So the studio, as far as the TV studio, we provide training for anybody that would like to learn how to use our equipment that we loan, and also the software. So we have an editing suite for the public to use. And that's really it for the public as far as services that they can come in and use. Publicly producing, obviously they can produce their own shows. I guess that's a big assumption. That is kind of, yeah, that's the main how they
and
use
that's pretty
it.
powerful.
That is very powerful. Yes, sorry.
What part does internet play in your programming?
We use the internet to get our shows out there. So anybody that has cable can watch it if they have cable in Avon Lake. But I'm assuming that I know that a lot of our residents don't have cable, so they can get it through our city website. And we also put highlight shows on YouTube. So our council meetings, that's one of our most popular shows. I don't think people really want to sit through a whole council meeting, but we do edit it down for their highlights and put that on YouTube.
So even if you lived outside of Avon Lake, you could still access your programming.
Yes,
yeah. That's pretty
full
cool.
shows and highlights.
Cool.
Yeah.
Barb VanBlarcum, let's talk about
Yes.
Hudson Community TV. What compels Hudson to provide this service?
Well, Hudson has provided this ever since the 70s when cable was first spreading across the country, and we entered into an agreement through a consortium of communities. And so we were with that consortium until the mid-90s when the contract came up again. Hudson decided with its own funding to start its own station. So I think the main interest with, especially being a municipal station, is the transparency it provides to the community. But it also provides the schools with transparency and available programming opportunities, coverage of what they're doing, what the city's doing, but also just it used to be the window to the community. It also welcomed we also welcome community members in to produce their own programs.
So that's one of the services you offer is equipment and training and making your own programs. How many stations are you running, and what kind of programming is on each?
Okay, we have 3 channels. One is dedicated. One is just dedicated strictly to a bulletin board of announcements with short videos and such. The second channel is all government meetings and also the school board meeting, and that has a regular schedule to it, depending what organization you want, what meeting you want to watch. But our main channel it both offers programming, like our Rotary has a weekly meeting that they record and bring to us, and we air at the same time every week. But also people come to the station, such as this, to produce their own programs, and the city produces programs, short and longer, more informative. And so it's a variety of things that we produce, the community produces, or that we just document for the city or schools.
So there's a wide range of opportunities in both of your stations. So what part does the internet play for you? And if you don't live in Hudson, you want to access this programming, how do you do that?
All 3 of our channels are streamed, and the main place to locate those would be www.hudsoncommunity.tv. Or watch HudsonCommunity.tv. There you can choose to stream the channels or to go to the archives of past programs. So you can view things online that have already been recorded, or the channel as it is airing.
Well, that's a great service to an area, not just to Hudson then, or to Avon Lake. Right. They're able to get information. I wanted to talk a little bit about funding. And where does most of your funding come from? You going to talk to us, Barb Cagley?
Sure. Well, any cable subscriber will see on their bill a fee of $3 to $4, and that money is collected and quarterly sent to, a check is written to the city. That goes into the city's general fund, and every year budget time I request a budget, and some of that is given to me. So everything's coming through the city, and it
Okay.
is coming from cable subscribers.
Okay. Are citizens ever taxed for this service? They are not taxed for it. How
No.
about in Hudson?
No, the only relation to taxes in our budget would be the city staff doing our payroll or supporting us in some way.
And so you get the lease fees as well? Is it lease fees
Yes,
from
we get
Spectrum?
100% of the fees that are generated in Hudson.
So it sounds like a local decision about how the money is distributed, but you're getting it through these lease fees?
Yes.
Okay, just want to clarify that. So the local government makes that decision. What I found interesting is you do not have any commercials or ads. Is that part of the agreement that you have to take as a community media center? You can't let Bob's Car Lot put on a commercial?
Yeah, we do not do commercials, and it's part of the public access agreement that people fill out when they produce their own programming, that they're not selling any products or services.
Okay, so
Although we do some marketing, it's never direct. So services, the realtor will do a program and talk about an interview with somebody that provides insurance, and through that she's showing her credibility and people are getting to know her, and we allow to sign off. I'm Jane Smith with XYZ Realty.
but she's not paying you for that time?
No,
Okay,
no.
okay. I think that's trying to clarify where the money's coming
Sure.
from, so I think that.
Okay.
Did you want to add something?
No, we also
Okay.
do, we can also take donations that would underwrite a program, so that
Okay.
would be part of our budget. but
Because you're
it's not
nonprofit.
a product.
You're nonprofit,
True.
so it would be donations.
You are. I am not. I am
Okay.
I am just a department of the city. So we do
Ah.
not have any nonprofit arm to our station.
Yeah, we're technically not nonprofit. Our
Okay.
Friends of HCTV is the 501c3.
Okay, but the donations could be made directly
Either
under.
place. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it has
I mean-
nothing to do with nonprofit status, it's just a donation. Okay. Well, if you've just now joined us, this is Forum 360, and I'm your host, Pat Simons. Today, my guests are Barbara VanBlarcum from Hudson Community Television and Barbara Cagley from Avon Lake Community Television. Barb, you had mentioned, Barb from Hudson, you've mentioned that you have a Friends of HCTV. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about their function, their purpose, can they raise money, and if they do, what is it used for?
Well, our Friends of HCTV group was formed just a couple years ago by people who have been involved at the station that wanted to show more support and actual monetary support to the channel. And so it is a 501c3, and they promote the station, they market, or they promote it, they welcome people to help them out on productions if they're on a production. But also, when we write grants, sometimes the grants aren't available to us because if the station's writing the grant, it's a municipal station. And so the 501c3 of the Friends of HCTV are available for receiving grant money that perhaps our station couldn't directly.
But most of any money they raise would be for a specific purpose versus a general fund purpose.
Yes, it typically is for a piece of equipment or some kind of outreach effort that is identified in the process of writing the grant.
We're seeing a lot of that around Friends of organizations. Even the national parks have conservancies and they're Friends of kinds of groups. Barbara Cagley, how about Avon Lake? Do you have anything of that nature?
We do for the city, and I'm using it actually as the chair of the Bicentennial Committee this year, but not for the station.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the National Alliance for Community Media, and you can both answer these questions. I believe there's also a subsidiary organization called the Central States Region, which both of you would belong to because you're in Ohio. I found it very interesting that Centerville, Ohio is the site of the founding of the national organization.
I didn't know
and
that.
it makes
I
me
didn't
very
know that
proud as
either.
an Ohioan to know we were a front runner
Yeah.
on that. Now, I understand that the Alliance is nonprofit and you must pay dues to belong to it. Could you each tell me your view of what are the benefits of being members of that organization?
Okay.
Go ahead, you can start.
Well, we've been members since we began, and I'd say the main interest is that it's a national organization that advocates for the community media and keeps us informed, let alone they work both ways, informing the government, but also informing all the stations in a networked sort of way. So it's an advocacy group, and that's our main interest in keeping us informed and up to date what's going on nationally.
Well, it's very valuable. Do you have a view on it?
Yeah, and I think a secondary is to make us feel connected to other stations across the country. We're isolated in our little studio, and what I found very helpful with my team is to get them involved in the different webinars, to go to the conferences, to bounce ideas off other people. Even simple things like judging. There's awards they do every year for shows, and judging those. They get to see all these other shows that other people have produced and pick up this little nugget of, oh, I like the way they handled that parade, because when we just did our parade, we've been doing it, this way and this way. So
It sounds like a very valuable thing, because as you say, you can become isolated in your own bubble, but there's changes and people have new ideas. And I'm sorry, you were going to say something.
With the regional meetings, that's how we met, and
Yes.
how we've kept in touch with other stations in the area, and up in Michigan and Kentucky, and so it's been a nice regional networking opportunity for us too.
Yeah.
Well, good. It sounds like
For
a very
equipment.
valuable service. I wondered if you have, could you operate if you were not members?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is like being that uber level of professionalism. You want to be in that sphere because you have all those attributes that you can gather from it. But you technically could operate with it, but it says a lot about your stations that you want to be in that realm.
Becoming more relevant and more up to date on opportunities and all. So it serves us that way, since we are sort of in our own little world.
Yeah.
At times it helps.
Well, the community
broaden that
certainly
world.
benefits by those shared expertise. I think that's just makes sense.
Yes.
Do you have any idea how many community media centers there are in Ohio? Hate to put you on the spot.
Oh, boy.
No, I don't have a figure for
I
that.
couldn't guess.
And I guess
Yeah.
what stuck out to me is I'm thinking, why doesn't everybody have this? What would be drawbacks that would keep a community from having the community media center? What would be the factors that would influence whether you have it or not?
Well, you have to start with funding, obviously, and that's really comes down to, if you're going through the government as we are, that's a decision of council. So the money comes in, they have to decide if it could be spent or how it's going to be spent. And I think every city makes that decision at a council level.
But potentially every city could have this, or every town, if they had the wherewithal.
Potentially, if
for
they
it.
have cable in their town, the cable franchise fees are coming from the rights of way of the cable lines laid in their community as a utility. And so every community, if they have cable, are receiving fees. It just depends. After the Cable Act of '84, I believe, there was rewording done, and it made it a decision of the community as to whether they use 100% or 50% or none of their cable funds, whether it goes to the cable station or goes to the general fund of the community.
So if the public doesn't have that service, a starting point for them might go to speak with their city council and say, what's the possibility of this? And then do an exploratory.
They could.
But the potential is there
Yes.
for other communities. Now, the Federal Communications Commission regulates through laws and monitors media in the United States. Do your operations have to be licensed by the FCC?
No.
Not necessary?
We're cables.
So the cable company
doesn't have
carries
to,
the license?
Yeah.
Okay, but you have to meet regulations, I imagine. If you were in non-compliance for some reason, would that be the cable company making that decision of saying, no, you can't do that, or?
Well, I think part of that part of that Cable Act was making that wording whether or not that it could be limited or not by the provider. And I don't think
we have
But you
any
must have
regulation.
guidelines about what you allow and what you don't allow.
I think it's more of the standards of the community.
Yes, yes. We wrote our own bylaws, but our own regulations that we have producers agree to before that we will air theirs. And we have the right to pull shows that don't follow those guidelines, but we're pretty open.
Okay.
Unless there's a lot of vulgarity going on, we are airing it. This is the voice of the people in our community. They have to be part of our community or sponsored by somebody in our community, but that's pretty limited. Now I do have, if it's something that's really controversial, the right to limit it, but we have to air it at least once.
So you have to deal with free speech issues.
Yes.
You have to make sure you've balanced that out.
Yeah.
I did want to ask a little bit about because you're under the auspices of FCC and legislation is involved, do you have any current changes in legislation that are pending that might influence your funding sources?
Well, currently there is an FCC discussion of changing the wording of how the money is used that goes to these stations, and that decision possibly could be made on August 1st. So we've been encouraging our viewers and our supporters to be involved in contacting the representatives so that the representatives could voice displeasure at having the funding of these stations taken away, perhaps.
So what would happen to you if the funding was removed?
Every community would need to look at that, and so would the providers. It's up to them how they follow up with that.
So it's not a simple thing. It depends on the community, how you're going to handle those changes, what the changes actually are.
Right.
So, but the public does have a voice in this if they choose to become advocates
Yeah,
for the
because
funding.
it could be that the funding's taken away, and so the community needs to speak up if they don't agree with that potential.
Well, it just is very important that that people know you're out there and get acquainted with you, so they're seeing all the things that you have to offer. I was surprised that it seems that shaky in terms of whether or not the funding comes in. It seems like it would make it very on edge all the time. Will they, won't they?
Yeah, and our advisory committee is going about, trying to get our city council to speak up to the representative. It's kind of a nationwide effort right now to make the voices heard of the importance of community media and access to the media. Because if this voice is taken away, there's no place for people to access the media, to use the media in a large format. So it's...
And then I think kind of looking forward as an insurance is how we use the internet more. So one of our focus has been to get our shows out in multiple ways. So if cable access is taken away from us, that we still have relevance. There's other ways to deliver our content. So we're looking forward as well as fighting now.
Sounds like you're always in a little state of flux. You have to be prepared to pivot and change as the needs come about. I can't believe we've run out of time. I thank you so much for coming, and I hope that our audience will take the time to get to know you better and look at what you're doing, and then maybe look at their own communities and see how they can expand it. But it is definitely a public voice, and our public has a say in it. So I want to thank you both.
Thanks for having us.
Yes,
You're
very
welcome.
much. I've enjoyed it.
Well, I want to thank Barbara Cagley of Avon Lake Community TV and Barbara VanBlarcum of Hudson Community TV. They have highlighted the important services that community media centers provide. We now understand that we can't take these services for granted, as its existence depends on funding, sources, and whether the public values and supports it. The Alliance for Community Media makes clear that for democracy to flourish, people must be active participants in their government. They need to be educated, to think critically, and free to express themselves. Community media centers provide the necessary resources that facilitate the public's ability and right to express themselves by creating community dialogue and engaging in civic life through local media. For more information, our viewers can see a list of website resources. For our listeners, you can go to allcommunitymedia.org, avonlake.org, hudson.oh.us, and www.fcc.gov. This is Pat Simons for Forum 360. Thank you for joining us, and have a great day.
Forum 360 is brought to you by John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, the Akron Community Foundation, Hudson Community Television, the Rubber City Radio Group, Shaw Jewish Community Center of Akron, Blue Green, Electric Impulse Communications, and Forum 360 supporters.